So like Naman mentioned, we're moving to the first panel of the morning. Gen AI is the buzzword, is what we heard from Naman and his session. So we go right into Gen AI in pharma and life sciences. Please join me in welcoming our panel for this morning. Mr. Gaurav Kapoor, Executive VP Indegene. We're happy to have you, sir. Round of applause. He will be our moderator for the session. Also, join your hands and welcome our panelists, Dr. Harsha, Head of Text Analytics at Merck Data and AI, Ms. Parvatham Subbiah, Director R&D IT Global Innovation and Technology Center at AstraZeneca. Request you to please sit where the tent cards are placed. Thank you. Dr. Ravi Shankar, our next panelist, Head of Global TA Excellence and Medical Services, Viatris. Thank you for being here. The fourth panelist, Mr. Edwin Pradeep, Global Head Intelligent Automation COE at Novo Nordisk. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Gaurav, over to you, sir.
Is it working now?
Yes.
Audible. Thank you. And this is not a Gen AI generated panel. This is actual. We are all real here, and it's been inspiring how we've seen it for the last 3 hours. Every time I come from US to India, it's pretty much, I get so highly energized seeing what kind of energy happens here. And hopefully as pharma people, we've been little laggards in the adopting the technology, but I think it's the right time for pharma to actually start looking at Gen AI and what impact is pretty much as fast as possible. Because if you've seen pharma, we've had a very interesting intersection with the technology. We've grappled with it for many years, but I think it's the right time where there will be inflection and we can move. You've seen pharma typically takes 10 to 12 years, $2.5 billion to actually take the whole life cycle from idea to actually commercialize. I think technology can really disrupt. We can really shrink it by 30%, make it 40% faster, 30% cheaper. So there are many ways to actually impact. We saw it in the COVID vaccine time when really when we were pushed to the corner, we really pushed the timelines, and I think we can do it in a fairly normalized way, adapting to the generative AI. So I have a very esteemed panel. And we have a very interesting mix. You've seen it that we have it from data analytics to the practitioner's view to the automation side. So I think we can make this very interesting for all of you. So I'll start by putting a question to my the whole couple of people on the panel. First one, especially Harsha and Edwin, for you, both of you to look at. From a maturity, I know startup world is moving, they can take experiments, they can move fast, but pharma from an organization side, how do you think, where are we on the adoption side, maturity, what's the appetite? Maybe Edwin first you, and then I'll bring it to Harsha, to you.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. When I see it, I think there's a pretty good maturity. I wouldn't definitely say laggard. It's definitely amongst the leaders. There is a good potential. We could also be really the trailblazers, right? But what we have typically seeing is use cases other than just the usage of ChatGPT. We are looking at document mappings. We are looking at document generations. And I think from that, from the maturity curve, really sets a lot more the industry view coming in for the use cases. That's what we are basically seeing.
And what's the, let's say, a single most challenging thing which is happening inside for that change to happen? Do you know, maybe which is the biggest challenge you will pick up if we have to really leapfrog?
I would say cutting the hype, because everyone just has their own idea of what it can do. But in terms of the technology and where we can actually achieve that, meeting the expectations in terms of the hype is really the single biggest challenge, trying to really convince the stakeholders of what exactly is possible.
Harsha, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Gaurav, for this question. So when it comes to the adoption and the level of maturity, right, and we see it as a pyramid structure. So imagine a pyramid structure. So at the bottom of the pyramid, it's wide adoption, low risk kind of applications. And that is where we see a lot of GenAI being adopted for creativity, productivity, daily efficiency. You can call them on a very high level workplace efficiency, right? So just take an example of many colleagues or speakers spoke about ChatGPT as an example. We see something like Microsoft coming up with so-called as a Copilot, for instance, right, which is integrated into a lot of your Office 365 tools that we have been using. So this is one layer where we can see a very high level of adoption because the risk is extremely low, and we rather see Gen AI or AI as more like an augmentary tool, right? It is not influencing, it is just helping us to be more and more effective in the day-to-day work. If you look at the next level of the pyramid, the next higher part of the pyramid, that is where we speak about probably more moderate risk, low to moderate risk. And here we see things around analytics, automation, for instance. Automation has been existing for a while, of course, for many, many years. Nowadays, what is happening is generative AI is trying to augment the whole automation processes. If you also look into reporting, dashboarding, any kind of analytics, decision-making activities, right? Same is happening as well. GenAI is also getting integrated into most of the solutions as well. And the reason we say it's a moderate risk or a mid-risk is there is always a human in the loop. There is always an expert who is looking at some of the results and then deciding what next best action has to be taken. Again, pyramid, right? So again, adoption is not as high as the lower part, but still certainly a good amount of adoption. The top of the pyramid, the top triangle part of it, right? I mean, that's where the whole challenge comes in because that is where we speak about very high-risk applications. Design of molecules, for example, screening the patients, recruitment for clinical trials, and all these things, where the risk of anything going wrong by having AI in the loop can be really high. Here is the place where we speak about impact on any quality practices, for example, good manufacturing practices, GLP, GMP, and GCP, and so on, right? So this is the way we look at it, more from a pyramid point of view, very high adoption for a very low risk kind of applications, and kind of more higher barrier to adoption, just because there can be an extremely high risk either to the patients, right, the manufacturing processes, or anything like this.
Very interesting. I'll come back to you, Harsha. I have another thought. Before that, I want to give a chance to Parvatham and Ravi from the practitioner's view. So Parvatham, first you. Obviously, we saw in COVID, shrinking of timelines and bringing a vaccine out in the market in less than a year, which was really, really groundbreaking. What do you see in the whole discovery to pre-approval stage, regulatory, clinical trial? What are you seeing in your company? And AstraZeneca obviously has been in the forefront in the news. So can you share any of the areas where you're seeing use cases? What kind of experiments are being done to use GenAI?
Sure. Thank you for that question. Good morning, everyone, and pleasure being here. Thank you for the opportunity. So zooming into the R&D life cycle or the value chain, GenAI has its use and use cases pretty much across the entire value chain, right from initiation of the discovery, which leads towards target identification, all the way through submission and beyond, right, including manufacturing operations and commercial. Pretty much across the entire spectrum, GenAI has its use cases. If I have to zoom a little bit into R&D in specific, again, within the R&D value chain, across, we do have use cases. So some of what's going on right now that I can speak about are definitely, for example, biomedical knowledge graphs, which are powered by generative AI, being leveraged by scientists to identify newer targets as well as newer pathways. So when you're looking at large molecules, for example, newer pathways that enable progression of higher probability candidates through the pipeline, that's an area where we find good value and good success in the use of Gen AI. And when we're looking at small molecules, for example, the lead into which molecules we zoom into and how we make them is also something that is powered by Gen AI. We are seeing good success there. And that's my favorite use cases as I see, but then the world's favorite use cases definitely are around content authoring and generation, right? Pretty prevalent. That's an area that we're going to see significant leverage of Gen AI capabilities, particularly the regulatory space, where we have a lot of submissions and health authority questions that are coming our way. The intelligence engines that we can create, which are powered by Gen AI, have the significant potential to shrink that lead time that is involved post-trial completion before when we can take actually the drug to the market or to the patient. And that content authoring and the accuracy of the data and information that needs to be brought in line with the expectations of the regulatory health authorities plays a significant role. And we're going to see a lot of that kicking in in a very short span of time. So overall, short answer is pretty much end-to-end. We see multiple use cases in play, multiple zones of success that we are already witnessing.
Very interesting. So yeah, that's a good segue to know, Ravi, if Parvatham is able to give you a molecule in 3 years, are you ready to then commercialize and get the right information in the hands of the doctors and the nurses and the pharmacists quickly? So you want to talk about pretty much at launch and how readiness for pharma can be accelerated using Gen AI?
Yeah, thanks, Gaurav. Again, to build on what Edwin and Harsha said, setting the right expectations, since Gen AI is evolving, what Gen AI can do and how we can capitalize on Gen AI capabilities for our building efficiency and also reaching out to either doctors or patients is necessary. And also to continue on the regulatory front, what Parvatham was alluding to, once the product gets approved, so where all Gen AI can be of help to a pharma industry, for healthcare providers, for patients. There are many, for sure, but maybe for the simplicity, I'll take 3 or 4 examples. What we are seeing can have a great application in the pharma and healthcare at large. Maybe to start with content, to continue what Parvatham said, if you look at pharma, a lot of time, energy, efforts goes in developing content, because once the product is available, we have to ensure that healthcare providers are trained, they know about the product, they know how to use, what are the side effects, how they should not use, so that they can treat their patients better. So our lot of efforts goes in developing content. We have a lot of content out there, curating the content, developing the content that reaches the target audience in a more efficient way, in a more capturable way is the one where a lot of efforts goes. Here we feel Gen AI can have a big impact. Again, ensuring that the content is curated well, made adaptable to the target audience need, Gen AI can work on. It also helps in ensuring that it reaches the target audience in an appropriate way. If we can have some search engines enabled with Gen AI, it can provide the content to the target audience who is seeking for such content, rather than having a general dissemination of the content to all across the doctor community. The other use case is more of a chatbot. So if you look at chatbot, again, chatbot, we have seen Bing, how Bing works. We have seen Bard, how it works. But is it fit for healthcare? May not be. So then how a pharma can leverage chatbot, develop a chatbot which is suitable to its need and leverage its capabilities. To start with internal, how we can build internal efficiency. We have our field teams, both medical science license from medical affairs and sales team that goes out there to discuss science with the doctors, to healthcare providers to build their capability. Yeah, we have a lot of content out there which they have to communicate. When they go and meet doctors, the expectation of the doctor is a high scientific conversation with those who are meeting them. But can everyone meet to that requirement? May or may not be. So how we can ensure that we make the data more digestible to the medical representative or a medical science liaison who may not be so well acquainted with the data, similar to someone who's an expert in that field. And that can be done by Gen AI. If we have the approved content housed and linked to a chatbot, a Gen AI chatbot, and a field representative is talking to the doctor, and some questions come in, he can easily chat in, extract the response, and also get the relevant documents as a link. as a link which can be opened and shown to the doctor then and there. So here we can ensure that we can train our field colleagues well. We can equip them with all the necessary resources for them to converse with the doctors better. Now, we switch the chatbot now. Instead of internal, if we move to external, now how it can build efficiency? At least in stringent regulatory countries, there is a mandate that every pharma company has to have a well-established medical information services. And many well-known pharma companies have medical information services in India and all the other countries. So if you look at the pharma resource and budget, a lot of it goes in medical information services. Now here, the service that's being currently provided is through telecall services, where a doctor or a healthcare provider or patient calls the telecall center, asks for a question, and they get the response. Again, we may have quality issues. Again, it depends on the telecall service provider to what extent the person is acquainted to the data that they are talking to, though the approved content is given to them. And also the timing. You cannot give 24/7 service. It is customized to the country needs. Some country needs 7-hour service, some country needs 12-hour service, some country needs service in their own language. So here a Gen AI capable, a chatbot can be a self-service tool for healthcare providers. For them to look into the content, get the information then and there. They don't have to call up a telecall center. So they save a lot of time in this. And they can get the content in the middle of the night because it's 24/7. And accuracy. Again, if we train the chatbot accurately with the approved content, it can give the right answers, thereby helping doctors to manage their patients when it's at most need. And again, not just the quality, again, the cost efficiency standpoint. As I said, a bulk of the budget of medical affairs clinical goes in MedInfo services. Even if we can channel 35% of the call to chatbot, it can be a huge cost savings to a pharma organization. The third is data. We all talked about data, and I'm very happy to see all the work that's being done to structure the data and ensure that the data is available to the people in need. Data is knowledge. It helps in developing strategies, it helps in knowing the unmet needs, and also developing communication campaigns. Now, one challenge that as a pharma we feel from science is there is so much of data out there. How do we make the data more interactive? Now, when we are launching the product, we have a number of clinical trials done, but these are available as subset in their own locality. How we can bring it together, have a pooled analysis and publish the pooled analysis. Here what we have to do is we have to extract the patient level data, code them, and do an analysis. It takes a lot of time, energy, effort. But if we make this whole data lake interactive through a chatbot, so I know what data I have, I do the feasibility assessment, and then I can pick up the data and analyze and bring it fast to the doctors for the conversation. Again, maybe another 2 minutes I'll take. So when the doctor starts treating patients, a lot of content gets generated, a lot of data gets generated. Again, I'm happy to see that now there is an effort to structure the data out there, and have one patient having a single ID is a fantastic idea. It's so amazed that you accumulate the data of this patient over many years, and that can yield a lot of insights into the disease management. Here, pharma can then come into and say, like, how is the drug working in the real world setting, and how can I ensure that I make the real world data available to the doctors? Here again, making this data available through a chatbot, through a cloud, through an analytic platform integrated with the cloud can help in understanding the data, analyzing the data, and coming up with the results very quickly. That helps in decision making, that helps in scientific communication, that also helps in indication expansion. In case if you're saying new usage, we can ensure that we develop more data and submit for indication expansion. The last piece is on the review. Again, a pharma spends a lot of time in review because it's a highly regulated industry. Anything that goes out of pharma has to be thoroughly reviewed, ensure that it is scientifically robust, and communicate what it should communicate to the end audience. So here, what we are envisioning, what we think Gen AI can do is make this review more simple, more digestible, where it can look into the content along with the references, it can match the references, pull out the references, which can bring down an human intervention by almost 70%. So a 30% effort is sufficient, while 70% can be done in Gen AI. But nonetheless, whatever examples I gave till now, there is definitely a need for human supervision, human intervention. So there is nothing that can be done without human. A human intervention is needed, but only thing is we are building a lot of efficiency within the system. Ultimately, with whatever resources we have, we can deliver much more than we are doing currently.
Thank you. I think you brought out very, very interesting use cases across the commercialization piece. While you talked about a lot around the regulation, that we are a very, I think people, non-medical people think that we are a really scary industry. There's so much regulation. And we are. I think that we are cautious at everything because you've seen since morning a lot of talking about patient centricity, patient lives. We're dealing with humans. So this industry is very, very careful in everything we do. So that's why I segue that for, again, maybe start with Edwin with you, that human in the loop. There has to be a balance that Gen AI can't do everything in this, right? Especially while doing medicines. So what's the level in your company moved on between a right balance, human in the loop, human plus machine? What's your point of view on this space?
Sure. So what we have seen is there is no use case where we have taken it out completely from the loop and said, Gen AI can handle this. So being in the automation space, there are places where we call it as unattended bots, which typically just goes ahead and does it without absolutely any kind of a human intervention. But in the Gen AI space, a lot more time is used before the product goes live. And there is also the ability to give feedback on the responses that we get from Gen AI, just so that we know the accuracy of whatever information is being presented back is up to the mark. And there are other safeguards also which are taken in place. So, for example, every response which is coming in, there is a citation from which specific data source it was picked up from, and also a hyperlink, so that then people can then go back, look at the context, and then give that feedback. And I think overall, when you look at it, this will continue for some time, till such time that the technology matures, there's more aspects of traceability, the explainability coming in. This would still continue. And eventually, we would reach that maturity where we can eventually say, it's just, this can get onto the autopilot mode where we don't necessarily need to have somebody look at it. But even if you're looking at any of the documents, these documents are not necessarily, which are being generated. These documents are not necessarily given at the final state. These documents which are generated are more in a draft stage. So that there has to be another human who reviews it, checks for its accuracy, checks for the content in all its aspects. And then there is two types of feedback, right? Once the document is actually corrected. But then the second part of the feedback is then going back to the original model to see if how this model could be made better in the subsequent runs. So I think a lot more safeguards, a lot more things we are seeing because of the emergence of this, still it being in its native stages. But I see that reducing over a period in time.
A quick follow-up to you, Edwin, on this. While we do this human in loop, the human here is the quality, the upskilling will change, right? You can't. So, what are you imagining? Let's say in your organization, 2-3 roles which will come in, as new, which will be required. Let's say I'm talking from an Indian workforce too. We handle a lot of global commercial capability centers here, innovation centers. So what kind of roles will emerge over next 6 to 12 months?
So typically, if you see, I would categorize them under three people, right? 3 sets of people. One, those who are extremely excited about generative AI and how it is going to affect their work. And these are the first people who would be the front runners in really adopting this technology. So even when we look at some of these use cases, we start off with training them. They are the first people because they have that natural interest. They have that ability to pick on bits of this technology, understand how this technology works, and then they really act as the bridge between the functional and the technology bits. And then there are others who typically follow them, and then there are the naysayers. So we'll not talk about the naysayers here. And so over a period in time, I think these people turn out, the front runners turn out to be really the experts in that field. Because they will really see the technology and the use case evolve over a period in time. From being the early adopters, they would understand both the limitations of the technology and exactly where they are able to contribute that expertise. And they would basically be setting the stage for how this evolves over the next period in time, and their inputs are more important when we are trying to build more solutions in this space. So I think that is where we are seeing a lot more
No, thank you.
interest.
That's interesting. I want to bring this to you also, Harsha, that you work in the data analytics space, right? A lot of stuff will become self-generated, self-service model. So what kind of roles will emerge for you guys to do advanced on GenAI? Where do you think the whole workforce skilling will happen, and new developers or new people who will come up in India in next 12, 24 months?
So in terms of the roles, right, so we see, let's say, a split of two. One is more business-facing, user-facing. And what is important is, at least within our company, we do have a dedicated group that is mostly focused on data culture aspects. Data culture. So we call them as a data culture group, right? So the whole idea behind this data culture group is to ensure to bring that kind of awareness within the organization. So again, we speak about two kinds of sub-entities, right? One is more business-facing, one is more technology-facing. So for business-facing, it is important to to bring that kind of awareness so that they understand what's the state of the technology in the market, how can the technology help with respect to bringing any kind of efficiency, productivity, creativity in our day-to-day businesses. And they need to be really some kind of a technology savvy, right? So they should not be technology resistant. So they need to be able to kind of pull the innovation that is happening in the market, and also bridge the gap between the end users, for example, and what's happening in the market as well. This is one kind of roles that we typically see are more business focused, still very savvy and highly interested in terms of what's happening in the Gen AI technology space. I think that is something that we are also trying to incubate quite heavily as well. The second part is more from the technology. So one challenge that we typically see is, I'm sure other industries also will have, is almost every, let's say, big company you speak about, right? Any big platform providers, any big data analytics solution providers will have some kind of an AI component. So everybody will have some kind of AI, some kind of a generative AI embedded. So now the question is that, so we have so much of AI, right? AI in every single pieces, every single sub-functions, functions. So the question is that how do we now integrate them, right? I mean, that's going to be the biggest question. That's the biggest question also to us as well, in terms of how do we answer our internal customers, internal stakeholders, in terms of what is the right investment, what is the right time to invest, is it anything like this. So that is where we see more roles like AI architect. So this is basically a new role that is defined by Gartner. So if you just Google and say AI architect from Gartner, it's a new role that is that Gartner is trying to basically sell. And these are the people with that kind of skills who understand the legacy architectural aspects of the organization, like typical data lake, right, data hubs and all these things, and also have a very good understanding of how AI would fit into it as well. This is very important just to ensure that we don't start building up more siloed data platforms and data applications. There is a good level of interoperability happening between different systems as well. That's very important. And also ensuring that we position AI in a right way to mitigate the risk of things becoming obsolete, right? Because the biggest challenge that we see is we start with something in 6 months to 1 year time from now. Things may start becoming obsolete, and we need then harmonization programs, consolidation programs. Again, it's an investment to buy and then investment to harmonize, right? So I think this is also very important. So these two things is what I see. The data culture is more like a horizontal thing, right? The data culture is focusing on the business users, business aspects, as well as on the technology users as well, because we cannot clone AI as experts, right? I mean, that's not possible. So what is happening is a lot of colleagues from people from data engineering skills, data analyst kind of backgrounds are trying to now become or use more Gen AI kind of techniques. So they are also upskilling themselves. So what is important is we need to ensure that the learning platform that we create is good enough that they are made fully aware of the end-to-end challenges, limitations, anything that comes in this space. So just to give you one example, most of the Gen AI requirements come up, right? There is a very first urge to start using GPT or any kind of, so every use case has to go to an AI. AI has become a reputation rather than a need. So the first thing we always recommend is, first of all, evaluate and see whether the use case or the requirements fits into a Gen AI kind of use case or not. If yes, then certainly there should be a thrive to kind of adopt some of this AI kind of technologies. If not, the traditional rule-based system, the traditional machine learning-based systems can also help a lot of times as well. So this is the way that we see is more around, yeah, business-facing kind of more AI skills, more around technology architecture skills, more around data culture, who's able to basically educate and bring up to the speed both the communities. This is what we typically see.
No, very, very interesting. So I think how India prepares itself to serve the global workforce. I think these are good new roles. Parvatham, you have a view on, you handle the Innovation and Technology Center. So what kind of roles you know, as project leads will require?
Sure. Just a bit of add on there. Couple roles we see will be strengthened in the context of AI pervasiveness, not just in India, globally, would be those roles that enable the privacy and legalities around the use of Gen AI. Those will have to go hand in hand with the evolution of Gen AI. So those are roles that also need to both evolve, support, and grow at the same pace as the technology does, because especially in the pharma and life sciences world, they are really tightly integrated. So those sets of roles are also going to be strengthened and evolving rapidly at the pace of technology, is the observation.
Interesting, thank you. I want to connect you guys with the audience. So we've talked a lot about doing things. I'm sure we can't do everything internally in our organization. So we've seen startup world here. We've IT company. There are tons of IT companies here, part of NASSCOM. So what's the kind of ecosystem you started to work with? Maybe from right to left. Edwin, you start. Is it startup, incubation hubs, or IT service providers? Whom are you collaborating with today?
Sure. So as of today, we are only engaged with service providers, mostly for their expertise. But it would be really interesting to see what these startups have to offer and explore cases from there as well.
So from our standpoint, we are working with some of the organizations who have this IT medical background to come up with some solutions for the use cases that we just elaborated. So definitely startups have a great role in terms of, I saw one of the presentations coming in terms of data harmonization, data cleaning, and ensuring that data is available for interaction, to building that interactive Gen AI tool by having the data, healthcare data. That's a great tool. Again, startups have a great role to play for sure with all the unmet needs that we have in healthcare. Pharma cannot do everything on its own because our expertise is in terms of research and development of new products. We understand the disease well, we understand the pathway, we understand the drugs, but we don't understand the technology well. And that's why definitely we depend on external ecosystem to help us in implementing some of these innovative tools.
Thank you. Thanks, Ravi.
Pretty much the full-on ecosystem. So we heard Dr. Sanjeev talk about our collaboration with the startups. So that's ongoing already. Definite collaboration with some of the big tech organizations which power our AI capabilities. And that also enables us in a way to catalyze our workforce transformation as well as service providers that help complement and enable us also build in-house capabilities. So pretty much the 360-degree of all help that we can get from the ecosystem, we are tapping into it.
So we see it in two ways. One is, of course, we have most of the front runners in the market, for example, be it Microsoft, Amazon, and so on, right? So they usually offer a standard platform capabilities kind of embedded with AI as well. So these are highly scalable. And that is where we rather tend to go for more standard products, standard offerings coming from some of these big players. And we then differentiate so-called as edge solution, very edge requirements, right? So in edge requirement, you have something very niche requirement. This is not something coming as a standard offering from one of these big providers because that's not their piece of cake, right? So they want to really sell more larger scalable solution. I mean, that's their target audience. And then that is where we then look into startups, small companies who are trying to now kind of cover that aspect of very niche requirements driven towards a very specific use cases, very specific type of data, very specific type of problem statement. So this is how we try to augment the space. Large providers for larger scalable solution, smaller startups, smaller companies, again, for a very edge kind of use cases.
Interesting. So before we wrap it up, one last question for all of you. Personal or from the company, just go into the next future zone. And I won't take it 5 years. Gen AI doesn't allow us to think so far. Take a 24-month, 36-month view. Harsha, think, which is the biggest impact area you will see things changing in your in our life sciences space? Go as aspirational as possible. Don't worry.
So I think personalization is something that we see because right now most of the Gen AI products that we see in the market are more general purpose, right? So the domain specificity and some degree of personalization, right? Personalized medicine, personalized health, for instance. I think that is something where I think in the next 2 to 3 years, Gen AI can certainly play a very strong role. That is what basically I think from my perspective.
End-to-end becoming paradigm, right? Adoption of Gen AI pretty much end-to-end becoming a paradigm is one area. Contribution to sustainability through this is definitely something that we will count on. And last but not the least, definitely we take pride in our ability to take medicines to patients faster, and that's going to be super accelerated through this. So we'll continue to be looking forward to and be proud about that.
So if you want me to say one area, that is data, I would say. In next 2 years, I would see a lot of innovation happening in this space. So we have a lot of data out there we call big data, but do we know everything about the data that we have? Really no. So understanding the data that we have really helps us in, like I elaborated last time, in understanding what the unmet needs and what do we come up with the different solutions. So having the data, the static data that's currently out there, to making it more interactive, to making it available to the end user, to assimilate the data, understand the data, and come up with strategies, the big thing that can happen maybe in next 1 or 2 years.
Thank you.
My personal viewpoint, coming from the automation space, doesn't matter if you're a CEO or an intern. I think Gen AI is going to help automate or augment some of your tasks. That's what I see in the next 2 to 3 years.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's been a lot of hype, a lot of game-changing work, which is also real work is also being done outside in industry, but I know Pharma has been a little skeptical, but I think we can take it off. And I think for India, it's a huge, huge opportunity. While mobile just helped us to leapfrog, Gen AI again can really help us, especially India to actually leapfrog in the world and take in the area of medicine, where we have been slightly behind on the innovation side. So good. So thank you so much. Really, it was a pleasure talking to all 4 of you. And thank you.
Thank you.
Just one minute, please. We have to give you some token of appreciation for all the exercise you did on the stage. So meanwhile, let me invite Mr. Dhoya Schneider. So he's the innovation counselor from the Dutch Embassy in India. He's come all the way from Delhi to share his views on the innovation. It's getting very important with the Dutch Prime Minister who came very recently to Bangalore that there's a big thrust of innovation between the 2 countries, and I hope there's something going to be talked about by Mr. Dhoya.